Welcome to Church Media Design TV, tips, tricks, and how-to for you, the church media designer. I'm your host, Brad Zimmerman, and I'm so glad to have you back. If this is your 12th time, or if this is your first time, we're so glad to have you here. And as always, we're joined by our faithful crew made of porcelain and plastic. It's the three wise men and Jesus. We have Dwight Schrute, Little Whitey, Colonel Sanders, and of course, Jesus Christ, the Son of the Lord Most High. Well, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about announcement slides, which happen to be the thing we make the most in the church on a week-to-week basis. So I want to help you guys make those faster and hopefully a little bit nicer than you've made in the past. So if the three wise men and Jesus are ready, let's get into it. Well, in this week's episode, we're going to be creating this announcement slide for this Thirsty Thursday worship and prayer gathering. Now, this is something we've done in the past, and I just put this together before the show, and I wanted to make something that would be reusable by you guys. And so I know a lot of churches do like a midweek or maybe on a Saturday once a month or something like that. That's a worship gathering that's just worship and prayer and an extended time of those things. So I just made up this little simple graphic, and I really want to cover how to make these graphics so that they look nice, they don't take too much time, and they also portray across the point that they need to portray, and so that people can get the information they need to get. And that brings me to a viewer question. And this viewer posted this question on our Facebook page, and you can find a link for that on the website. And let's read this here. And it's from Chris, and he said, "One thing I'd like to see also is how the graphics are integrated with the information being shown, i.e. song lyrics, sermon points, etc." So that's what we're going to cover today in these announcement slides, because the information is the most important part of this. You know, with a series title, you have the title and then really cool graphics. And the information of text isn't quite the most important thing. Well, with an announcement slide, the text is definitely the most important thing. So we're going to hop inside Photoshop and get started on making this very information-centric but still nice-looking announcement slide. One of the major things that's really important with these to make them so that they don't take too much time is to base them off great photography. And I talked about this in one of the first episodes about how photography and good imagery is the best place to start. And we talked about the stock exchange, sxc.hu, and the great photography you can find there. Well, another great image resource that you can check out is Morguefile. I think that's how you pronounce it, but if you want to head over to their website, morguefile.com, and check out, it's a really simple interface, but they have a lot of great photography. And I just did a image search for bottled water. And this is an image that I found that just it looks amazing. It's very classy looking, and it was definitely shot by a photographer who knew what he was doing. So I've downloaded this image, and I've opened it up inside Photoshop, and we're going to use this to create our graphic from. So let's start by making a new file. So we'll do File, New, and we're going to use a 1024 by 768, our church definition preset. We're going to hit OK. And the first thing we're going to do is just click and drag this bottle image in here, and then we'll just resize it down. I'm going to hit Control T for free transform, then I'm going to hold Shift and Alt to kind of constrain the proportions and scale from the center, and we'll get this scaled up so it's the perfect height. Now the first thing that you'll notice is that this isn't wide enough. And sometimes you can scale it and say, well, I'll use the width of an image that's too skinny to get it, but I really want this to be the center of this image. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale out the two sides of this picture. So we're going to take our rectangular marquee tool, and we're going to drag a selection around the outside just to the left of our bottle. And then we're going to do Control T, and this is going to transform just the area we have selected. So now we can click and drag this until it's wide enough. And you might have to zoom out. I'm on a little bit smaller resolution monitor. So now you can see we have this nice, and since the background is kind of this ambient looking, very shadowy background, we can scale it and you're not really going to notice too much. And we're going to fix that a little bit more also. But now let's just continue that on this side, or on the right side, and we'll just make sure it's just off to the right of all of the the bottle in the center. We're going to hit Control T again, and we're just going to click and drag until this is scaled out to the full width. So now you can see that our image has been scaled up and is taking up the whole page. But now we want to make sure that we can't tell that we've scaled that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to blur out the background. We're not going to blur out the bottle. We're just going to blur out the background. And one of the major keys to Photoshop is knowing how to make selections. So we're going to do easy selection here. We're going to go up to select, and we're going to select by color range. And it's going to say, sample colors, and we're going to just select the black on the outside of the bottle. We're going to drag up our fuzziness until we have just pretty much the bottle and that shadow at the bottom, and we're going to hit OK. And you might notice that you're not selecting the center of the bottle or the bottom of the bottle, and that's okay because we're going to add that to our selection. And there's a lot of different ways to add that to your selection, but the easiest one is to switch into quick mask mode. Now what quick mask mode does is it allows you to paint a selection or take a selection that's already been made and turn that into something that you can paint. So if you go down to the bottom of your tools palette, you'll see a little button down here that says edit in quick mask mode, or hit the letter Q. And that's the same in all versions of Photoshop. So if you don't have CS3, you can just hit Q. The button might look a little bit different, but that's what you need. So now we're going to just grab a paintbrush, and we're just going to grab like a nice hard brush, maybe 19's our size. Size doesn't really matter. Then we're going to zoom in, and again I'm holding Control and Space Bar to give me my zoom tool. We're going to zoom in here, and we want to make sure it's set to white, and white is going to get rid of the red on the page. And that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to get rid of all of the stuff on the inside of the bottle here. And there's little tricks like right here on the stem. I'll click once at the top, and then I'll hold the Shift key and go straight down from it and click again, and it will draw a straight line between those 2 points. So there's some little different tricks. So now I'm just going to go through and get rid of all of the center of the bottle. So now I've gone through, and as you can see, the whole center of the bottle is white and looks like the regular image, and we have the red on the outside. But if we zoom down here on the bottom of this image, you'll see that, it's kind of shadowy, and I'm using this hard brush, and so I want to go through and I want to change to a nice feathered brush and just kind of softly get rid of some of this stuff so that it has a nice soft edge to it, which is one of the great things about painting a selection, because you don't actually have to select hard lines like that rectangular marquee tool. You can actually select different levels of opacity, so you don't have to totally select a part of an image. You can just select a certain level of the transparency of it, which is what we're going to do down here at the bottom. So now that we got this looking pretty nice, we're going to click the Q key and just switch ourselves back over, and you'll see there's a nice selection there. And that selection is selecting just the bottle. So what we want to do is we're going to do Control Shift I, or we can go up to Select and down to Inverse. And now it's inversed our selection, so we're selecting just the background. And now we'll do our first effect, and we're going to go to Filter and down to Blur and choose a Gaussian blur. And it's going to give you a little preview here, but also will preview in your composition. And we're just going to set this maybe to like 2.5 pixels. That looks a little too much. Let's try 1.5. That's looking pretty good. So we'll hit OK. And as you can see, we have this nice looking selection to deal with. The other thing that I'm going to do, and this is just going to be for future, I'm going to do Control Shift I again, so I'm selecting just the bottle. I'm going to do a new layer, and I'm going to grab my paint bucket tool, which seems to be hidden from me right now. It's underneath the gradient, and I'm going to just do a quick fill on top of that so that we have just that selection, and then I'm going to turn that off. We're going to use that in the future for a couple different things, but I just wanted to have that before I got rid of my selection. And the easiest way to get rid of your selection is to do Control D, and that's deselecting the area that's currently selected. So now we have our background's a little bit more flowy and ambient looking, and doesn't look like we stretched it at all, and we have this nice crystal clear bottle sitting in the middle. So now let's add the text in. And the place we're going to get our font for this project is again where we get most of our fonts from, and that's dafont.com. So if you head over to dafont.com and you can check out Prozac, and it's from the Zeta Font Factory, which I have no idea what that means, but it's called Prozac, and it's a nice sans serif font, which, if you don't know what sans serif is, serif versus sans serif, serif has the little foots at the bottom of letters, like an I would have the little feet sticking out. Sans serif does not. So that's just a little tip if you didn't know that one. So this is a nice sans serif font, and it's got a little bit of design to it, but it's not overly done, and I really like it for that fact. So we're going to use this font. So now inside Photoshop, we're going to grab our text tool, and we'll change our font size to something pretty big for right now, maybe like 72, and we're going to type in thirsty. And we'll scale this up to a pretty good size, and we're going to rotate it just a little bit, and we're going to make sure to have some of this Y hanging over behind the bottle, because we want to be able to hide a little bit behind there. And as you could see in our original, we have a little bit of that Y hanging behind. It's kind of like translucent behind the bottle, and gives it a very cool, more realistic effect to it. So that's why we had that hanging over. And now we're just going to go through and get all of our text placed, and then we'll worry about coloring and all of that stuff after. So now that we have our text on the right angle and placed kind of behind the bottle, we'll go through and put all of our other text in there. And the nice thing about that, we already have it on the angle, we'll just make copies of that so it always stays on the same angle. So we're just going to grab our arrow tool, hold down the Alt key, and drag a copy. And we're going to write Thursday here, so we can just delete a couple letters and just type out Thursday, and then scale this down. And as long as we drag from the corner, it will scale it on that same angle. We want to remember to keep some of that T hanging over. And you can have as much as you want hanging over, or as little as you want as well. So that looks pretty good. And now we'll just make a couple more copies for our small text. And we're going to make sure to put the information of what time this is at, because people should know where it's at. So we'll just put that in there, and we're going to make this about the same size as our area of the width of the Y at the bottom. So it's a little bit smaller, but you got to consider this is on a big screen in your room, so people should be able to see something that small. Now, this is where you also have to think about where your screen is placed and how the graphics fit in. Is it a screen that's way up high? Are these on the side? Or is there some things that are maybe blocking it? And is it pretty small that we need to have all the text really large? So for us, our screens are 9 foot by 12 foot and 3 feet away from the row. So they're pretty easy to see. So we'll just do that for our 6:30 text, and we'll just drag a copy over here. And we'll type in worship and prayer. Worship and prayer. Well, let's drag that into position. And now we can zoom out and see we have all of our information on the slide. Now we can go through and do some of our coloring. And I really like using layer styles to do my coloring, because it's really easy to check and change out my color pretty fast. Instead of having to highlight and change the color down here in the corner, we can just use the layer style for it. So I'm going to pull up my swatches, because I'm actually going to use some swatches for this. And then I'm going to go to my thirsty, and I'm going to hit the little FX button here. I'm going to do a color overlay. And then I'll click on the red, and I'll go over here, and I'm going to select this nice bright green here. Looks good. Actually, on our original, I can see it was blue, so we're going to select the blue. There we go. That looks much better. And then we'll go to our Thursday and do another color overlay, and we'll select a good orange here and call that okay. And then finally, for our worship and prayer, we could leave it black, but I'm going to do like a little bit more of a gray color, because the black is just a little bit too punchy. So we're just going to click on 6:30 and yet again do a color overlay. And I'm just going to pull up this window and maybe do a nice mid-dark gray in here. Hit OK. And then one trick is you can actually, if you want to reuse a color you have on one layer for another, you can hold down that Alt modifier and grab your color overlay and drag it over to worship and prayer, and it will duplicate it and copy that to another layer. All of the layer styles that you want to do that way. So now we're looking pretty good, and as you can see, we're pretty close to being done. So what we need to do now is we need to cut off this Y and T so it's behind the bottle. And the way we're going to do that is with a layer mask. Now this is one of my favorite ways to make a image look a lot more professional, to give some more depth to it and more perspective. So, well, not really perspective, depth. So we're going to go to our Thirsty, and we're going to click on this little button next to the FX, which is Add a Layer Mask. And that's going to, yet again, allow us to paint a mask over top of it. I've done a pretty poor job of explaining what masks are, but basically, and let's see if it's any better this time, but basically a mask is you have an image, and you can paint on or cover up with a shape what you want to be seen from that picture. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit more sense. So you can take a circle and throw it over top this keyboard, and you would only see where the circle is on top of the keyboard. So that's kind of what a mask does. So that's what this layer mask is doing. And the reason we made that copy of that silhouette of the bottle is so that we can mask out those things that are behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click on this layer that we turned off earlier, and you can see that it's selected what's on that layer. You can do that with any layer. So if I would control click on the Thirsty layer, it would make a selection, deselect, there we go. It would make a selection of Thirsty. Reason it wasn't working there is I was selecting the layer mask and doing a selection of that, which there's nothing on the layer mask. So you can make a selection by doing that. So we can hit Control D and deselect that, and we're going to go and do a layer mask of this layer 2, a selection of layer 2, and then we're going to click on our layer mask, and we're going to grab our paint tool, and we're just going to make sure that it's set to black, and we're going to just start painting, and it's going to get rid of all of the text there, which is totally fine. And now we'll go up to Thursday. And if we would click the layer mask button right now, it's going to get rid of everything except the T. So I'm going to undo that by hitting Control Z, and I'm going to do Control Shift I, and that will select the outside. And so now when I click on a new layer mask, it'll get rid of just what was behind the bottle. So now we've gotten rid of what's behind the bottle, but now we want to make sure that shows through a little bit because the bottle's transparent. Now if this was like a solid object, you would have the text just hide behind it, but since it's a bottle, we want it to show through. So the easiest way to do this is to make some duplicates. So we're going to make a duplicate of this Thirsty just by dragging this layer down to the new layer button, and it will make a copy. And then what we're going to do is yet again go make a selection of that bottle by control clicking on that layer, and then we're going to do Control Shift I, and we're going to just make sure our color is set to white, and we're going to start painting. I'm going to uncheck my other Thirsty layer, so my new Thirsty layer is the only one on, and I'm going to start painting outside here. Oh, we want to have it set to black, sorry. So I'm just going to make my brush nice and big, and we're going to start painting and get rid of all of that. Then we'll do Control Shift I and make sure it's a selection of just the bottle. Make sure our color's set to white, and we'll paint in just that part of the Y. So now we have our full Thirsty, but it's split into two layers. One that's behind the bottle and one that will be in front of the bottle or on the outside of the bottle. So now I'm just going to do this real quick to the other letters. So now I'm going to go through and do that to Thursday as well, and we'll jump ahead in the future after I've gotten that done. But basically all you're going to do is make sure that you have the part of the tea that's behind the bottle and the part of the tea that's to the side of the bottle in two separate layers so that we can alter the ones that are behind the bottle. So now I've gone through and I've split those, the T and the Y that's behind the bottle into two separate layers. You can see here that will be what's behind the bottle, and then we have what's on the outside. We really don't need to worry about the outside stuff because that's all done. We just need to worry about these two layers that are supposed to be behind the bottle. And the way we're going to make them look like they're behind the bottle is through transfer modes. Now, transfer mode sets the transparency of one layer to another layer based on some different settings. Now, the best way to figure out what they're doing is just to kind of mess around, and you can use this pull down here and set it to, dissolve or darken, multiply screen, overlay. I know that overlay uses the grays, the grayscale part of an image, and then multiply and screen are based on the white or the black of an image. So that's what we're going to use. But since we're using a layer style, we can't set the transfer mode because the layer style is overwriting the transfer mode. So we're going to apply the color overlay to the layer itself. So we have to go through a couple steps here to do that. So on this T that's behind it, we're going to right click on the layer and we're going to say rasterize type. And that's going to make it so we can't edit this type anymore. So make sure you're done with what you need to do before you do that. Then we're going to right click on the color overlay and we're going to do create layer, and that's going to turn that color overlay style into an actual layer. So now you can see that it's created this other layer above here, and we're just going to apply that to the layer below, and that's what's setting the color. So we'll just right click on this layer and we'll just say merge down, and that's just going to merge those two together. So now we have this orange T that's all good to go. So now we can go down to our transfer mode and we're going to set this to overlay. And you can see that it's put it nicely behind the bottle and it's left the outside rim so it's dark, but you can still kind of see it in the background. So now let's go through that and do that to the Y of thirsty. So again, we'll right click on the layer and we're going to do rasterize type, and we're going to right click on color overlay and do create layer, and then we're just going to merge down that colored layer. And then we'll set this layers transfer mode to overlay. So now it's sitting behind the bottle. Now the last thing to make this effect even more realistic is the water would be distorting this text inside the bottle. So we're going to go through and we're just going to blur up the text so it's more of this like ooey gooey, I guess. That's a bad adjective, but you know what I'm saying. So it looks like the water's distorting it. So we're just going to go over here. We're going to grab our blur tool. We're going to set our strength to maybe like 75% because we want this pretty blurry. And we'll grab a feathered brush and maybe make it a little bit bigger, and we'll just start blurring out this Y until we have a nice ambient feeling. That looks pretty good. It's kind of soft and subtle. So now we can go over to our T of Thursday and we'll just do the same, and we'll just kind of click and blur this out until it gives us the look that we're looking for, which I'm looking for a pretty subtle look here. So I might blur this out pretty good, and maybe we want to change the opacity down just a little bit so it's a little bit more subtle. And same with the Y of thirsty, we'll maybe kick it down to like 80%. So now you can see that it's nice and soft and looks like it's inside the bottle. Well, one thing I almost forgot to do in there is I had a couple paint splatters behind the text just to give it a little bit more of the cool factor / just gives it a little bit more designed feel to it. And this is just an easy thing to throw in there. And of course, they're my paint splatter brushes. So we're going to click on our brushes here, and we're going to click on this little arrow, and we're going to go to load brushes. And we're going to go find our brush that you can download from the website. And we're going to go find our set here and hit load. So now we have all our different brushes here, and so we're just going to grab a couple of these that I think would look good. So we'll grab a couple of these clusters, like maybe this guy here, and we'll just scale this down, and I'm just hitting the left bracket to scale it down. And I'm going to make a new layer that's behind all of my text, and I'll just drag it down behind my text. And I'll just, splat that down. And then let's just do one more, maybe with this guy here. And we'll do that on the same layer. And we'll do that guy like that. Now we'll just do a nice color overlay, because the black, again, is a little bit too crazy. So we'll just do a nice light gray / white. That just gives it a little bit more texture behind the image. So hit OK. And now we have these nice little paint splatters behind there. So don't forget to go over to the website and check out those paint splatter brushes, because they're a great resource. Also, I got a question from somebody saying that they weren't, the files weren't unzipping well. So I've re-uploaded that file. I think there was an error with all of our FTP issues in the past couple weeks. I think there was an error when I uploaded it to the server. So it should be totally fixed. So head back to the website and download those again if you've had a problem with them. So now we're good to go, and we can do, my favorite way to save images is to go to File, and then we're going to go down to Save for Web / Devices. Usually it just says Save for Web. This is also the Tiger Claw. It's Control Alt Shift, all of your modifier keys, and then the S key. We made up really weird names for all these combinations in schools, like the Bear Claw and the Tiger Claw, which I think were all the same thing. Just all three of those and then the S key. So we'll click on that, and it gives you some options of what file format you want to save as. JPEG is going to look the best for this type of file. And then you can set your size to be, low, medium, high, very high, or maximum. And usually if you do very high or even maximum, you're going to get a really nice looking file, but it's going to get rid of extra information that you don't need, so that these files aren't way crazy large like you sometimes will get out of File, Save As, JPEG. So that's why I like to use Save for Web. So we can just save that image out, and we have our Thirsty Thursday prayer and worship slide done. And as you saw, we got in all of the most common information that we needed to get in there. I didn't really talk about that at the beginning, but we put in all of the text that's most important to draw people's attention. So we said it was worship and prayer, we said what time it was, and even in the title it said what day of the week it was. And then we'll let the announcement guy or somebody at an information table tell you even more information about it if you need to know. But this at least draws your attention in, and it draws your attention in with a nice looking picture. So in the next couple weeks, we're going to do a couple more variations of these announcement slides just to give you a feel of different ways that you can quickly put these together. So hopefully you enjoyed this first installment of announcement slides. So now that we're creating some of these graphics on a weekly basis for our announcements and even our series graphics, it's really easy to get burnt out and run out of ideas, even though we're all very creative, and I know that we all have the potential to be thinking of things all the time. I still run out of fuel sometimes of new ideas, and so I'm just going to give you a few resources of things to check out that will maybe fuel your fire of what's possible. And the first one is a Christian resource, and so this is what other churches and other Christians are putting together, and I would encourage you to flavor your inspiration with what churches are doing as well as what people who aren't Christians and aren't working at a church are doing, because sometimes the church world isn't quite up to par with everybody else, but sometimes they're way beyond everybody else. So we want to make sure to flavor our inspiration and what we're keeping our eye on with both. So the first place I would check out is head over to Flickr to the Church Marketing Lab. And this is a part of ChurchMediaDesign.tv, and they have this Church Marketing Lab on Flickr where there's some discussion boards, and there's also a pool of photos that are from people at different churches of graphics they've made. And so there's some really great stuff in here. There's also some really not so great stuff in here. But there's a lot of different things you can look at, and there's a lot of things that are like announcement slides or flyers or different things. So it's a great place to get some inspiration. Now, as far as the non-Christian or the regular resource you can check out, this is from logos more so, but check out faveup.com, and you can check out, they have some great different logos in here that people have been making. And it's just a nice place to check out how people are using fonts and text. And this might be even more inspirational for series titles than your announcement slides, but this still is a great, like, what's hip and what's new in the regular modern culture of what people are using. And so this is a great place to check out. Like even this home graphic, I think is really classy and really simple, but gets across the point. So check out the Church Marketing Lab on Flickr and faveup.com. Well, this week I got another freebie for you, and this freebie I have to give away because, well, it's a video I did a long time ago or a couple years ago, and there's no way that I ever could sell it because there's a bunch of copywritten material in it. We were doing a spoof on The Fabulous Life. If you've ever seen that on VH1, or if you remember Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous in the past, we did a little spoof and we did The Fabulous Life of Jesus of Nazareth. And we did this series that led up to Easter, but we went through and made these fabulous life of like how fabulous Jesus's life was. And we compared his life to like modern celebrities. And Steve, our pastor, has this phenomenal voiceover, like communications. He was a communications major, and so he has this great voiceover voice. So he did this super cheeseball announcer voice, and we made these different videos. So check out this Fabulous Life video, and we've gone through, and I think it's pretty funny, and there's a lot of different ones, but I'd love to know what you guys think about these Fab Life videos. So send me an email. Let me know if you liked it, hated it, think I'm the son of Satan, or whatever you may think after you watch these videos. But I think they're pretty hilarious, and they bring up some different topics that are easy to launch off for a pastor. So they're nice little intros. So go to the website and download this Fab Life video. This week's edition of Church Media Design TV is sponsored by Bolthouse Farms. Not because they asked us to, but because Brad really likes to drink them. Bolthouse Farms, try it today. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Church Media Design TV. I'm so glad that you guys are joining me for these episodes, and it's so great to get feedback from you guys in all sorts of ways. And we want to meet you where you're at in your social networking universe. So if you want to head over to Facebook, if that's a part of your Starship Galaxy, I have no idea. But if you want to head over to Facebook, if that's one of your homes, and become a fan of Church Media Design TV, you can find a link on the website for that and become a fan of us on there. You can leave messages on the message board as you saw today, or you can also get in touch with us on AIM and on Skype, and you can find the two different, my AIM name and my Skype name on the website, as well as they've been somewhere down below here while I've been talking about these things. So hit me up on those, as well as you can send me an email, brad@ChurchMediaDesign.tv. Send me comments and questions, as well as you can always go to the website and leave comments on there. I check that all the time, and it's always great to have a good comment on the website. So when someone new checks out the show, they can see how much you guys appreciate it and how the questions are being answered and asked. So head out to all of those places, as well as please tell friends about the show. I'm so excited to be continuing to do this. This is our 13th episode, and it's just going great, and I'm really enjoying doing it, and I'm just so glad that we can bring this resource to you, and I want to continue to get it out to as many people as we can. So tell a friend about the show, and thanks again for tuning in. I'm Brad. That's the three wise men and Jesus, and we're saying, see you later. We love Bolthouse Farms at Church Media Design TV.